Okay, hello there, whoever you are. Are you listening to this on the day of its posting or even the week thereof? If so, I believe a happy holidays is in order. This is coming out on Christmas Day. And if you are listening on Christmas Day, I hope that this finds you in a relatively relaxed and comfortable way. I hope that you are not in the midst of any kind of family turmoil. Very often, especially during tumultuous political times, going home for the holidays can be a challenge. Those of you who've been with me since the beginning may remember 2 years ago, just after I started this podcast, I spoke of a not so great holiday I had where I didn't do such a good job of connecting with my family. But hopefully you're doing okay and this is finding you well. Welcome to Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown, and I am going to be leaving tomorrow, which is going to be probably the day or two before this posts, to go to my in-laws' place in Virginia. I do that every year for the holidays. And last year was actually wonderful. I think the kids are getting older, and so they play on their own a lot more, which leaves us adults to have a more relaxed time. So I think it's going to be good, and I'm looking forward to it. I always think of this one particular thing when it comes to holidays, and it starts with something that I teach in my class. Like pretty much anyone who's been to my class has probably heard this spiel before, and if you had, I'm sorry, but there's this one thing that I teach about tree pose. You see, to me, tree pose is not about your ability to stand on one leg without falling over. Because being able to stand on one leg without falling over doesn't really do much for a person in the scheme of their life. For me, the ritual of standing on one leg is about what's happening in my mind while I am doing that, and how much say I have about that. Can I create enough space inside my head that I get to choose how I want to respond to things rather than reacting? And that skill of being able to choose how I want to respond rather than react, that is an invaluable skill. And it can be practiced in the context of standing on one leg. My favorite example of that is I had one particular woman who came to my class for some time, and she informed me that she taught her 78-year-old mother the tree pose practice. But she did not even bother to try to teach her the physical part, only the mental part. So when they get together for the holidays and people start to get into like a fight maybe, Mom says, okay, everybody get into tree pose. And she just means like a mental state where you're not going to fight with people that you love. And I think that's very much what tree pose is about. It's about cultivating a mindset where I'm not going to fight with people that I love. So, for whatever that might be worth to you, while you are in the midst of your holiday, if you are listening to it at that time, I am wishing you well. Please hang in there. Let's keep our wits about us, shall we? Today on the podcast, I am talking to Shahar. Ooh, I think I got that right. And I had a very fun conversation. It was quite a random occurrence that brought it about. Frankly, it was a rare moment of life convergence and just gut feeling that made me book the time and jump on a call with just a random yoga teacher I'd never met before. I was sitting at my computer and I was thinking about my dad, who I have not seen in a very long time. Far too long, honestly. He lives in Israel and he's not able to come visit me, and I just haven't been able to go see him, and I don't really know right now when I can. And so I was there thinking about my dad, and then I was even just thinking about some like geopolitics things in terms of Israel. And right in that moment, an email popped into my inbox from a podcast booker. I get kind of a lot of emails from people trying to book guests on the podcast. And frankly, I never use any of the suggestions. Honestly, most of the time, they're not at all useful. I just think like I'm on some kind of mailing list, and it's very clear sometimes that they've never listened to the podcast because it doesn't make any sense who they're trying to get on. But in this moment, it was somebody trying to book Shahar, who is a listener of this podcast, I learned. And in taking a quick look at it, I thought, oh, it's a yoga teacher, and she is an Israeli yoga teacher who is living and working in Berlin, in Germany. And I thought, oh, like just right when I was thinking about Israel and my dad, and then all of a sudden this Israeli yoga teacher sort of pops into my inbox. And I just like took a quick look at what she was doing, and like right off the bat, like the way she writes about what she's doing and what she's working on, like immediately I thought, oh, this is totally somebody I think I could talk to. And she most certainly was. It was really enjoyable to connect with somebody like this, a podcast listener and a fellow teacher, and you're going to listen to it today. Before we do, let me drop my stuff. I'm going to be in London at Try Yoga Camden, January 12th through 14th. I'm going to be in Nidau and Bern, Switzerland, January 20th through 22nd. I'm going to be in Armonk, New York, February 3rd, and I'm going to be in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, February 16th through 18th. You can find out about all of those gigs. You can listen to the archives of this podcast and read my blog or find my online yoga video. Again, a reminder, you've got until the end of the year to get 20% off of your video purchases using promo code HOLIDAY20. Again, you can use promo code HOLIDAY20 to get 20% off any J Brown Yoga video purchases. All of that stuff can be found at jbrownyoga.com. We are coming to the end of the year, and if you've been listening to the podcast and you've been enjoying it and you haven't ever taken a moment to show a bit of support, you might do that. You might go to a blog or podcast page and make a direct donation, or go to iTunes and write a review and give us some stars. We really appreciate it if you would do that. What else? Also, let me mention, I know I normally do this on the other side, but next week, the first week of the new year, I think it's actually on the 1st that it will post, I am talking with Sean Korn. And boy, did I have a talk with Sean Korn. It's totally awesome. You should definitely listen to that. Okay, I will touch base with you on the other side to bid you adieu, but for now, let's go ahead and listen to this talk I had with Shahar.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Jay Brown, how are you?
I'm good. Is this Shahar?
Shahar, yeah.
Shahar.
Yeah, wow, that was good. Yeah.
Oh, I tried. Well, I did go to Hebrew school at some time in my life.
Okay, so you know what it means.
I don't really.
Okay, that's like a really basic word in Hebrew. It means light.
Right. I might have known that at some time, but it's been a long time. But I'm familiar with the sounds. I was very good, like at my bar mitzvah, I did all the Torah portions, not just my Haftorah.
Oh.
Because I was kind of just a kiss ass and I could memorize things very well.
Wow, cool.
But I remembered during the ceremony, I was making mistakes and they kept stopping me, and I was upset that no one would know if they just let me go, you know.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, I like the Torah. It's also a completely different kind of Hebrew. I cannot even read all of it.
Yeah, and it didn't even have like all the little accents on it. You had to memorize them all, you know.
Yeah, this is what you do in a bar mitzvah. I was happy to be a girl and not have to do that.
Well, that's interesting. We could come back to that. You know, it's fun for me to talk to you. I think, first of all, we have to give a little props to Sue Morton, your friend, your booker.
Yeah, she's amazing.
She's the person who made it happen. And I think it's interesting. I get a lot of emails from bookers, and a lot of times they're just like these stock emails, like they didn't ever even look at the podcast.
No, she's a real pro.
But she's a real person. And also, I'll just say that there was like a sort of a convergence that happened where it was like right in the moment when one of her emails came, I was thinking about my dad a lot. And my dad lives in Israel.
Oh, okay.
Which is a very long story. He's been there for a lot of years. And
for religious reasons or political reasons or something like that?
You know, I don't know if I have an accurate answer to that.
Okay.
I know
okay.
that
happens.
He has a wife who's religious and converted to Judaism in Israel. Much more so than he is. But you know,
when you do the conversion, you sometimes end up being much more religion than somebody who was born to that, especially if you do it in Israel.
Well, what I would say is she is a lovely woman, and she's kind of like the best Jew I've ever met in a sense. You know, like she really comes to it from a lot of heart place. I hope that didn't sound wrong. I mean, I like Jews. I'm Jewish, but I think I haven't really identified with religion. And I remember I did visit my father in Israel one time. And
oh, cool.
I remember, it was some years back, I remember he had a friend who was a rabbi who I spent time with and had like a number of like philosophical discussions with.
Oh, that's always interesting.
And yes, and he was sort of probing me. And, you know, again, I haven't identified with religion. I married a woman who's not Jewish, and she didn't convert, and we had children. And I have tattoos. So I've just basically like...
yeah. When you said like she's the best Jew that you ever met, so I was thinking that I always call myself the worst Jew in the world. So today you're going to be the worst Jew. I have tattoos. I work the gods. I bow to the sculptures. I practice Buddhism. I'm living in Germany and I'm marrying not a Jew. So...
Wow. See, I think you just bested me.
Yeah.
I'm living in Germany.
Yeah.
You might have just bested me. Wow. So
and
you
I'm
understand.
marrying a German as well.
Yeah. So I was going to say this, when I had this conversation with this rabbi, I remember one time he was saying to me that, Judaism was like an old coat that you have to wear even if you don't want to. And I was like, no, actually, no. I don't have to wear that coat. So I think
on the side of the road somewhere in India around 7 years ago or even more, I just left it there. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because I read that you took your first trip when you were 18. And I remember when I traveled to India in 1998, I was in my mid-20s, but I met a number of Israelis. And it was something like you guys got like time and like a little bit of money to do something, and a lot of people went to India. Is that do I remember that right?
Yeah, that's true. Most of the people around their early 20s after the military service, they go to India because it's cheap and you can stay there for a long time with not that much money. So they work hard, they save money, and then they go to places like India or South America when you can stay for a very long time. And my sister done something like that, but she wanted to go again for like a shorter vacation, and this was the time when she convinced me to come. So I was like a bit too early, like I was only 18.
I see. Yeah. So you went to India, but did you have to do military service?
Unfortunately, yes, but I was doing mostly like educational work with kids in tough cities and things like that. Like I didn't have anything to do direct with the military.
I see.
But yes, I was there. So, it was very long time ago. It looks totally crazy now, but
I know. Yeah. Well, I remember that. I just remember like being there and like being on the bus and seeing like these kids younger than me, you know, at the time, and they were like all decked out in their military gear with machine guns.
Yeah, that's the experience my boyfriend had also when when we first came to Israel for the first time, was that mostly in public transportation, you see like tons of soldiers and they're all kind of, you know, geared up to...
And young, young people.
Yeah, of course. You start with 18 and most people finished with 20, 21. It depends.
Yeah.
But it's really crazy that they just go with their machine guns everywhere. But for us, it's normal. And you have to, I explained to my boyfriend as well, like you have to take your machine gun with you. You cannot just leave it at home. You cannot just leave it somewhere.
Yeah.
You know,
you're like on call. They could call you to duty at any moment, right?
Yeah, and usually they use the public transport to go to the base and from the base. So you see them all the time in the public transport because as a soldier you get it for free.
Yeah.
So they are everywhere on this public transport. It's just the whole country from 18 to 21 is in the military. That's pretty crazy.
It is crazy. I think, you know, I feel, again, coming back to it, like I really need to go see my dad. He's not able to come see me. It's just a long story. Like he actually can't leave the country right now because he was involved in like some kind of court trial and they got his passport. He can't leave.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's like a whole thing. Too much to go into, but he can't leave. So I really need to go visit him. But it's a hard place to travel to. It's not like an easy place to go to.
Yeah, it depends. I think like if you go to some places in the desert, there is only desert there and it's pretty amazing and it's very, very beautiful. So that's what I do when I'm there. I take at least a few days to just go to the desert or go to somewhere beautiful in nature and just enjoy the warm weather that here in Berlin I cannot really enjoy at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know. It just feels like I don't know, for some reason, a place that I'm wary to travel to, you know? It's such a crazy time.
Yeah, it is always crazy times there. And that's part of the default of this country.
All right. Yeah. So you went to India before you did your military service?
Yeah, that's true. That's very uncommon. Most people, like after high school and before military, they go to places like Ibiza or, you know, they go to party in Europe or something like that. And I went to India, and this is where I met yoga.
I see. And so what was your experience of yoga in India like?
It was pretty amazing. I was very lucky. I didn't realize it at the time, of course, because it was my first yoga experience. But I had quite an amazing teacher, and I learned really a lot about yoga in a relatively short amount of time. And since then, I was kind of hooked. Like I kept practicing yoga more or less since then. And that was over 14 years ago. And it was not always as deep as it is right now. It was kind of like an on and off thing. And for many years, it was just like a weekly class that not every month I actually made it. But it became a part of my life. And especially when things got rough, it became a source of a place where I can go to support.
Mm. And where were you in India?
I was mostly in northern India, like Dharamsala, Rishikesh, things like that, like Himalaya area.
Yeah, I was in Rishikesh for a while. That was like the place where I had some of my most profound like yoga, experiences as well. That town felt like really charged, like a real, what I thought of in my mind going to India, what a yogi town would be.
Yeah, yeah. It is like that. It's still like that. I was there also last year, but just for a short visit, and it's still very, very charged. But it's still also, yeah, like very flooded with a lot of offerings about yoga because everybody hears what things like you just said and going to look for the light there.
Yeah.
And I felt that you need to be very careful, because there are a lot of offerings there. And I personally now as a teacher, I was kind of like, I don't know how many of them are really something that I would recommend to somebody.
Well, I've told people that. I mean, when I went there, I didn't go to be in an ashram. What I meant is I remember being like, I stayed in like Laxman Jula, right there along the water. And like every morning when the sun came up, you could hear the kirtan over the loudspeakers. And every evening when the sun was coming down, you could hear it. And like people would get fed. And it just seemed like in all my travels through India, like Rishikesh had this particular feel. Now, again, that was 1998. So
it's changed.
I haven't been there since 1998. And I wonder what it's like now, but
it's like a spiritual supermarket, basically. Yeah. That was my personal experience from it last year, but
even
that's
back
not
then,
necessarily a bad thing.
No, well, even back then, though, I met a lot of frauds, and I've told people that a lot of times I think you can get. I mean, I could get in trouble for saying this, but in certain regards, you get better training in yoga practice, like in other places in the world, not necessarily India sometimes. I remember
definitely
like a lot of frauds and touts. I mean, I did meet like real teachers there, but it was pretty random. Like he wasn't in an ashram and he was like up in a cave most of the year and then came down during raining seasons. And I spent like 10 days with him. So that's why I was sort of curious, like your teacher, how did you come into contact with that teacher? And what were the sort of things that your teacher taught you that first trip when you were 18 that you remember?
To be honest, I don't remember that much about that teacher. But I remember that he made it clear that yoga is more than just asana. And that was for me at the time like a really good ground to start yoga with, because I know that afterwards when I went to the West and a lot of other people that I met that practiced in the West, you kind of get the notion that yoga is only asanas, and this is the practice of yoga, and this is the main and the most important one. And by this teacher, I think I understood right from the beginning what yoga is all about, and that it is a way of life, and it has a lot of guidelines about how to live your life on the ethical level. It has a lot of other practices that are not necessarily just asanas. And that was a really great start. Yeah, this is one of the main reasons I'm very thankful for that teacher. And I spent just a few days with him, but this is something that stayed with me until now. And even in the way I teach, I also try to, every student I meet, I try to explain to them that, we practice mostly asana, but yoga is much, much more than that. And especially on my website, I like to write and talk and teach mostly about, the parts of yoga that are maybe less popular and, don't look that good on camera.
I know. Well, those are those early seeds that get planted. Those first experiences sometimes are the most powerful ones. So, all right, so you're 18, you have that little dose, couple of days, and then you go back, you have to do your military service. Did you go all the way through your military service?
Yeah, I managed to finish the full 2 years. It was not easy, but I did. Yeah. And it was hard to practice at the time, I have to say.
Were you trying? Did you find yoga in Israel after you got back?
There is tons of yoga in Israel, but not where I lived during my military service. But I had a roommate that she was also into this kind of stuff, so we didn't done yoga per se, but we talked a lot about spirituality. And at the time I was very much into the arts and things like that. That was part of my spiritual thing. So it kept alive in this sense. And one of the first things I've done when I could move back to the center of Israel was to go back to yoga.
And so what sort of yoga did you find in Israel? You said there's lots. I mean, I know people in Tel Aviv, there's lots of yoga there, but as you said, in other places there's not so much. So what were you able to find?
I was living at the time in Tel Aviv, so I was able to find everything I wanted to.
Yeah.
And I landed by also a really great teacher. She was teaching very basic Hatha yoga, very similar to what I teach now, actually. And I was with her for a few years. And at some point, mostly because I became very, very depressed from many different reasons, I kind of stopped practicing and I also skipped town. And only when I was in kind of good place in my recovery from depression, I came back again to another teacher. I always stayed with the classical Hatha yoga. But at that time of my recovery, I kind of understood that I really need to start to dig deeper into all of these other aspects of yoga that I knew that exist. Mm-hmm. And this is actually what led me to India again and to the same teacher. And I met many, many other teachers as well. I was in Dharamsala for quite a long time, almost 6 months. Mm. I was studying a lot of Tibetan Buddhism. I was doing my first yoga teaching training, which was also somewhat unconventional, you can say. And that's also kind of the thing that started this kind of concept of becoming a yoga teacher.
Mm. See, I understand that. I had a similar thing, I was probably around, 20, 22, 23, where I feel like I things went real bad for me too, like I just felt like I hit a point where I either have to like find another way to live or kill myself because I can't keep going like I was like going. And
yeah, I know this feeling.
That's what it seems like to me. Like right around the same age, it seems like you had the same thing. I don't know what it was for you. My mom had passed away when I was 16, and just like reckoning with that grief, like you're trying to find hope in it. What if you don't mind me asking, what was it about for you? What put you into the dark place?
It was, as I said, a combination of many things. It was a family crisis. I was in New Zealand. I was traveling there, having the best time of my life. And then all of a sudden, my parents called me in the middle of the night and tell me I have to go back to Israel as soon as possible because my father was at the hospital. So that was kind of a traumatic experience. My father is alive and healthy and driving all of us crazy. But at the time, it was not a given, it was not a given at all that he will even stay alive. It was very unclear what will be with him. But he was so strong that he survived it. He is not in 100% full capacity now, but he's, as I said, healthy enough to drive us all crazy all the time in a positive way.
Yeah, well.
So that was a trigger, of course. And, I was living in Tel Aviv and I didn't really know, what do I want to do with my life? And even if I knew, I had some kind of a vague idea. I wanted to become an art teacher. As I said, I was at the time very much into the arts, but there was a lot of like heavy kind of existential questions that were just laying very, very heavy on me. And I didn't have anybody that I could talk with. And I had a job. I had even a pretty cool job. I had an apartment with my boyfriend. It was somewhat dark, but, sometimes Tel Aviv, it's very expensive in order to live in it.
Small apartments in Israel, too, I've seen, just like New York.
Yeah, definitely, especially in Tel Aviv. And if you want to live on the coolest street, you will take everything.
Yeah.
And at the time, cool was a big value.
Yeah, me too. So I made all kinds of decisions at a certain time in my life about what was cool to me. And then later on, you're like, I don't know how important that cool is.
Yeah. So from the outside, my life was really cool. But from the inside, I was like dealing with trying to recover from different kind of traumas that I had in my teens and in my early 20s. I had all of these questions, and that was really, really dark. But at some point, as I said, like I took help, I went to therapy, I've done all kind of stuff. I got to, very, very dark places, and even to, rock bottom. But when I hit this rock bottom, I managed to slowly come up. But the existential questions that was there before was not away. Like maybe I managed to recover my traumas, but the basic questions of why am I here and what am I even doing here didn't went away. And this is where really yoga saved my life in this sense. Like I don't say that yoga cured me from depression, because that would be irresponsible to say and not true. But it definitely helped me a lot in the sense of kind of being a place that gave answers. And especially when I went to India for the second time, I finally met people that I could seriously talk with them about this kind of stuff without being totally crazy, because we were all crazy in this way. Yeah. So that was in and of itself extremely healing.
It seems to me like that what yoga has come to mean to me. It's like where you ask those questions and even like the answers, like sometimes I wonder about that. Like, yes, there's answers sometimes, but often it's just the questions even more than the answers that are important.
Definitely. This is something I realize even more and more, that also as my role as a teacher, I feel that more and more that my role is to give people questions than answers.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I also, I spent a little time in Dharmasala, probably about, 7-8 days. And when you were there, you were studying Buddhism, I know like often like the Dalai Lama would be around and giving teachings. Did you ever get to meet the Dalai Lama?
I didn't meet him personally, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Although I was there for quite a while, and I was kind of like waiting for the opportunity to have a bit of a personal audience with him, like small groups and things like that. He does that sometimes.
Yeah.
But that lucky I wasn't. But I was in teachings of the Dalai Lama many times. I was after that, after the trip I just talked about, I was also there for more than a year to volunteer. I had like a volunteering job there. So during that year, I was at least, every time he was teaching, all of us just, we closed the center and went to go to the Dalai Lama teacher.
Well, I'm going to tell a very embarrassing story because, when I went there, we got there the first day and they were like, the Dalai Lama is going to do like one of these audiences for the travelers who are here. You can go. So we had this opportunity to go to one of these. I don't know how many. It probably was a pretty big group. I don't know. But like you could go have this audience. And we were like, great. But my friend and I who were traveling, granted, we were much younger at the time. We were traveling and on our way there, we had stopped in this town. We were at like this tea shop. And this woman offered us opium. And neither of us had ever tried it before, We were like, yeah, sure. And then she was like, this isn't the opium you smoke. This is the opium you drink. You just put it in your tea.
Oh.
So.
I didn't even know that existed.
That's what she told us. And then in any case, we got to Dharmasala and we were like, we wanted to try it. And then she didn't tell us how much to take. And we just took way too much, which is totally dangerous. We could have totally killed ourselves. But we spent it was like a good day and a half just like getting through this haze of a thing that we put ourselves into. And when we finally emerged and we're downstairs in the thing, everyone was like, did you go see the Dalai Lama yesterday?
Oh no.
We totally missed it. I missed my audience of the Dalai Lama because I was strung out on opium.
Oh no.
It was terrible. It's a terrible moment. I mean, we laugh about it now. And it was fine. I wasn't so much a Buddhist. My friend was. It was even worse for him, I think.
Yeah, I imagine if you are more of a Buddhist, that's a very
terrible.
big opportunity to miss.
We weren't really into drugs necessarily. You know what I mean? We weren't even. It was just a stupid thing that we did.
Yeah. But that happens, that happens all the time. And that's part of India in a way, because as a traveler, you have so many opportunities and so much things that you can do. Drugs is one of them. And yeah, you need to make tough choices. I'm very happy that I never done drugs in India. I don't say I never done drugs, but I got clean from drugs actually when I was in India. Mm-hmm. I stopped with all kind of alcohol and smoking and other stupid things that I was doing when I just started with Buddhism on the beginning of my second trip there. And this is one of the best decisions I've done, and it's something that I can really recommend to people to try out. And I talk about it a lot, about the basic ethical parts of yoga. And one of them is, yes, try to get a bit more clean at least. Mm-hmm. And I think that for me, at least, was something very, very helpful on my path.
So you took some refuge, eh?
Yeah, I did quite a long time ago and a few times ever since. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, like, I don't know, the sources of the darkness that led us to the light, they don't really go away. Like you said, like those questions always remain, but you just have better ways of addressing them.
Yeah, that would be very correct. It's something that I will agree with, and I still experience all the time.
Mm-hmm. All right, so you're back in Israel. You're taking lots of yoga. You're going back to India and spending periods of time studying Buddhism. You said you did your first teacher training in India. Is that right?
Yeah, I've done it on my second trip. As I said, it was not a very conventional yoga teacher training. It was a bit more old school, It was a very experienced teacher, and he was also a good friend of mine. And he told me, like, yeah, you should teach. Let me teach you how to teach yoga. And, I don't have any certificate with 200 hours on it. In the end, I have no idea how many hours we spent. But we just done yoga together and talked about yoga. And all I had in the end was a notebook full of notes. Mm-hmm. And I don't talk about it much because it sounds like very unprofessional.
I know, but it was that there's certainly like that's not unprecedented. And most of the people nowadays who are considered these like senior teachers, I have these people on the podcast and they're considered these, esteemed senior teachers. They had the same kind of training back when. They didn't have these structured trainings. They just had a teacher over some period of time, usually like a year or two.
Yeah, in that case, it was a bit shorter, but it was definitely a very good experience for me. When I started to teach, when I came to Germany 5 years ago, I felt like it was not really enough, this training, because it wasn't long enough. So I've done like another teacher training, like a more official one. It's also Germany. If you don't have a certificate,
so wait, how do you end up going to Germany?
Yeah, that's a whole different story in and of itself. I actually wanted to comment before on what you said about teacher trainings, if I'm allowed.
Yeah, please, whatever you want to say.
I think this is something we both have in common, that we kind of have a bit of a doubt about, the whole teacher training system going on nowadays.
Mm-hmm. I know. Right now I haven't been talking about it a lot because the Yoga Alliance is like doing all this stuff and I have such mixed feelings about it. I don't really know even what I want to say about it. I know some smart people are kind of involved in consulting, and I've met David Lipsius and I know Andrew Tanner, the people who are very involved with what's going on there, and I'm just not sure. I have reservations. For me, the issue is always just about hours, the way that like you're suggesting, you have this communication with somebody and they share information with you and you learn from them, and trying to like structure these trainings into hours, it sort of reduces it to something else. And I've tried to like kind of work around the gray areas of the standards and what that means. And I believe that people who've trained with me, like you, they end up doing probably more than 200 hours, but I sort of refuse to log it the way that you're supposed to. You know what I mean? Like trying to log it like that, it kind of, for me, it squelches what I think of as the pedagogy of like the way it works. Yeah. So I don't know what, I from your different standpoint, I don't know. You said you did another training, so at some point I know some places it matters, and now I've moved from Brooklyn, and couple of places here, it doesn't really matter so much. So I don't really know. I kind of want to see what they do, but from your standpoint, out of the country, does the Yoga Alliance bear any relevance to what's going on in Germany or Israel?
I, to be honest, don't know what's going on in Israel because I never taught there.
Okay.
I lived there, but at that time I didn't taught much.
Yeah.
In Germany, we have like our own yoga alliance thing. It's like a yoga Verband, like it's kind of some kind of other organization that controls that. Our minimum is 500 hours. That was the training that I was doing as well. Like after 200 hours, you are allowed to start teaching, but most people have like 500 hours. And I didn't have a problem with that as much, although I totally understand and agree with your point. I think what for me is kind of missing, not necessarily from my own training, but from other teachers that I see as well, is some kind of a depth and also some kind of personal connection with the teacher that just goes lost, and it's not kind of, you don't have to have it as a part of the training. So most people just spare the time for themselves, although the connection with your teacher is one of the most important things. And it anyway got lost when yoga came to the West, and it kind of became this kind of a group setting kind of a thing that was never there before.
See, isn't that interesting? I always start there with people when I want to talk about yoga, because I think the fact that it is this group setting is incredibly significant. You know, like prior to sort of 50, 60 years ago, there were no group classes like we have them now.
No.
It was always this kind of relationship to a teacher that you would have to have, whatever that relationship was.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people, again, from my personal experience, talking with a lot of graduates actually, and even doing a small survey about it, a lot of people come with misunderstandings what it means to be a yoga teacher. They come kind of also unprepared, like they don't have a deep practice for themselves. And this is what I try to offer on my website. I offer on my website some kind of a program that can prepare people for that better, or people that, you know, maybe even done already training but don't feel prepared to teach, just in order to deepen your own practice and really understand yoga theory and philosophy from a deeper point of view and find your own questions and your own answers and your own whys. And I know that for me, I would never be in a place where I am as a teacher now if I didn't came to my teacher training with more than 10 years of practice already.
Well, I appreciate that a lot. And I would say that to me, that practice isn't just about asana, like you're saying, you know, like...
Definitely.
We sort of saying that we associate our yoga with like bringing us out of this depth place that we went, this dark place we went to, you know, like... the thing that helped us find direction, you know. And when you come at it from that standpoint and then you start to teach, it's sort of different than if you just sort of come at it as, ooh, I really like yoga classes, I'll be a yoga teacher, you know.
Yeah, and I even noticed, and I think, I don't know if I heard you say that or read it somewhere, that you also share the notion that some people actually prefer to do a yoga teacher training and to invest these 200 or 300 hours and, you know, a bunch of money than to actually practice every day or to actually come to a weekly class on a regular basis. And this is something that just personally kind of blows my mind, because these people are going and teaching after that also. And that concerns me sometimes.
I totally hear you. But it's a mixed bag, though, because that's sort of like a market thing. Like it's people, for some reason, like in their minds, believe that they're going to get more value if they pay more money for something. So there's this sort of like, we're all been sort of brainwashed to behave certain ways, you know?
And it's also about what they have offers. I think a lot of studios and a lot of, yoga teachers, generally speaking, you know, they offer weekly classes and they offer teacher trainings, and there is not that much in between. Like there are many.
And the classes have gotten shorter and often less about any kind of education and more just just practicing, just asana practice.
Yeah.
And so if you're a student who is interested in the deeper inquiry that we're talking about, that's what I've often written about too. Yoga teacher training is kind of your only option.
Yeah, and that's a shame, and that's something that was really upsetting for me, and this is why I created my website and my online program, and this is what I try to do right now, to just really give an option for people, which is also more.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of Jay Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.